Welcome to Gospel Truth with Andrew Wommack, a teaching ministry that focuses on God's unconditional love and grace. And now, here's Andrew.
Welcome to our Thursday's broadcast of the Gospel Truth. Today I'm continuing a series talking about the power of hope. And I tell you, this has really been a powerful series. It's things that you don't hear people talk about much. One of the main points that I'm making that is different than I've ever heard anybody else teach on hope is to say that hope is a positive imagination. I've taken all of the scriptures about imagination and your ability to see something on the inside, and I've related that to hope because I believe that that's what Romans chapter 8 verses 22 through 24 is talking about. It's talking about hope that is seen is not hope. For it to be hope, it has to be unseen, and yet you're seeing it. It's talking about seeing it in your imagination. And I've been using a lot of scriptures talking about how that most people just read the Word of God on like a surface level, and they don't ever get the power that's in those scriptures out into their life. One of the ways to do that, I believe a major way to do that, is that you take the Word and then you let it paint a picture in your imagination. You use your imagination in a positive way. And I was using some scriptures out of Ephesians chapter 4 verses 17 and 18 on our program yesterday. Let's look in Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1. I've referred to these verses, but I want to use this to make a big point today. Hebrews 11:1 says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." Faith gives substance. The word substance is talking about physical, tangibility. You know, this table, this is a granite top. This is substance. You can touch it, you can see it, you can feel it. Faith brings into physical manifestation, into substance, things that have been hoped for. But if there is no hope, then faith can't bring it into reality. In other words, it's like hope is the first step of faith. Faith only brings into reality things that have been hoped for. Now that's a major point. Again, I'm not sure that everybody understands how important that is, whether I'm expressing this properly, but you've got to have hope before you have faith. There's many people that try and skip the hope stage, and they just want to go straight to faith. There may be somebody who got a diagnosis that you're going to die of some disease. You hear me or some other minister talk about that God can perform a miracle. And so you want to just receive your miracle. But have you ever hoped that you could be healed? If you haven't gotten to the place where you are hoping to be healed, then your faith can't bring that healing into reality. You can't skip this step. And there's a lot of people that just want to instantly go, for they have never seen themselves operating in the supernatural power of God. They've never spent any time increasing their hope, and they just want to jump straight into faith and get their miracle. And it says here that faith is the substance. You could say faith gives substance to things that are hoped for. There has to be hope first. You know, I heard a story by Charles Capps, I believe is the one I heard say this, and he was, I don't have no idea if this was a real story or if it's just a preacher story. You know how preachers are. And anyway, he talked about a guy that came out of the hill country, and he had never been in a big city before, and he came down and he walked into a church service, and he was sitting in this church service, and it started getting really hot. He was fanning himself, and all of a sudden, this usher walks up to this little thing on the wall right next to him and turns it. And within just a minute or two of him turning that little thing, all of a sudden this guy could feel cold air blowing on him. And he was just so impressed by this, he totally missed the whole message. And as soon as that service was over, he went up to this usher and he said, "What was that thing on the wall that you touched?" And he says, what are you talking about? And he says, "You came up and you turned that dial on the wall, and within just a minute or so, cold air started blowing." And he says, "Well, that's a thermostat." And he says, "That's the greatest thing I've ever seen." He says, "Where could I get a thermostat?" And he says, "You can buy a thermostat in any hardware store. So before this guy went back to his, little hut out in the woods, he decided he'd stop by a hardware store. He bought a thermostat. He went home and he put it on the wall of his cabin. And when it started getting hot in his cabin, he went over there and turned the thermostat. And guess what? Nothing happened. Because the thermostat doesn't produce air conditioning. But the thermostat controls the power unit that does produce the air conditioning. And the reason I bring that story up is to say that this is kind of the way it is between hope and faith. Faith is the real power. It says in 1 John chapter 5, verse 4, this is the victory that overcomes the world, even our faith. Faith is what overcomes the world. Faith is the power of God. Faith is like the power unit, but you have to have this thermostat to get it involved or engaged and going. Once you start hoping for something, then faith just kicks in to start bringing it to pass. And a personal example on this is that my wife and I one time were going to go buy a car, and we didn't have any critical need at the moment, but the car was 5 or 6 years old, and it was just getting time we knew we were going to get one, and we thought that before we had a problem, we ought to start thinking about what kind of car we were going to get. We didn't know what price range cars were in, etc. So we decided we'd just go down to a car dealership. We weren't going to buy. We weren't interested. We weren't motivated. We were just starting to gather information, and we went down to this car dealership. And car dealers they understand the power of hope and the things that we're talking about. And what they will do, instead of just giving you facts, I was just wanting facts. What is the price of a new car? How much is it going to cost me per month? What are the warranties on it? Etc. Just facts is all I wanted. Well, they didn't want it. Excuse me. They didn't want a deal on just factual terms. They wanted to put me in that car, and I said, I don't want to go test drive a car. I just want to go get this information. And they said, no, sit in this car. Doesn't this feel good? Doesn't this smell good? Let's drive around the block. Doesn't this feel smooth compared to the car that you drive? And anyway, what they did, they got me to seeing myself in that car. They didn't want to deal with me on just facts. They wanted me to see myself in that car. And then they wanted me to go home and see myself in my old car. And you know what? The comparison, the contrast would make a big difference. Anyway, they got me into all this emotional stuff and seeing myself and all of this. And by the time we went home that night, we did put our foot down and we didn't sign the papers. But I can guarantee you by the time I got home, man, I was motivated. Matter of fact, I stayed up late that night with pen and paper, sitting down, figuring out what we could afford, how much we could do, and I was motivated. It's exactly like this said. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. Once you get your hopes up, I guarantee you, your faith starts working to produce it. One reason a lot of people's faith isn't functioning is because they haven't spent time hoping for something. You have to hope and get to a place that you can see yourself succeeding. If it's financially, if it's physically, emotionally, relational, in your job, your career, whatever it is, you need to spend time building your hope. And when you get your hope built up, then I guarantee you faith just starts working to produce the things that are hoped for. But sadly, a lot of people will not get their hopes up. In our society today, we have so much litigation and there's so much, liability over everything. That, like if you go to a doctor, the doctor, one of the very first things they'll tell you is, we don't want to get your hopes up. And the reason they're saying that is because if they tell you, oh, this is really a minor thing, and then if you don't take it seriously and if you were to wind up dying from it, then this doctor would have liability. They could come back and say, you didn't get him to take this seriously. And so anyway, they always err, if there is an error, on the side of being too dramatic, too critical, too negative, so that, somebody can't come back and sue them. And I understand the day that we live in, but I'm saying that not getting your hopes up is one of the worst things that you could possibly do. You need to get people's hopes up. People need to be hoping and believing for the best case scenario. But like when you go to the doctor, they will intentionally paint the very worst case scenario. Even if you had cancer, and if you go back and if there's 0 traces of cancer, they'll never just tell you you're cured because, again, a liability issue. Plus, they don't fully understand what cancer is. And so if you don't understand exactly what's going on, you couldn't say with any degree of certainty that it's completely gone. But even if there's no traces of it, if everything looks good in your life, the typical doctor will say, now you've got a 20%, 30% chance of this thing coming back, and they will talk about worst case scenario. And if you are totally healthy and feel the best that you've ever felt in your life, they'll still tell you that, oh, this could happen and that could happen. I tell you, we just live in a society that is going to constantly, they believe it's wisdom for you to prepare for worst case scenario. And our society today does not encourage people to hope. They feel like that you can deal better with the negative if you were expecting it and anticipating it than to have something good anticipated and not come to pass. And I will grant you this, that in Proverbs chapter 13, I believe it's verse 12, the Scripture says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. And if you are going to get your hopes up and then you don't see the thing that you've been hoping for come to pass, it does tend to make your heart sick. And I admit that that's one of the downsides. That is one of the potential risks. But you know what? I think that the benefits of operating in hope and building your hope are well worth any potential risks that go along with it. You know, I could compare it to like falling in love. Every person, whether it was when you were a little kid or whatever, you loved somebody, liked somebody, and the feeling wasn't returned, and man, it just makes your heart sick. And some people, the way they respond to this is just to wall themselves off. They are never going to open themselves up. They are never going to get close to another person again. They will never give anybody this much freedom to hurt them again. There's probably people watching this program right now that's the way that you've lived your life, and you may not have even consciously done it. But you won't let anybody in close to you because you've been hurt, and you don't want to be hurt again. Even though I can understand that logic, I'm telling you that's the wrong way to live. Love is one of the things that God has given us that makes our life different than an animal. Man, love is important. We're supposed to love God and love people. And this is one of the most important things in our life. And even if you've been hurt, you know what? You need to open your heart up and get your hopes up and let yourself again start dreaming and expecting that maybe there's a person that God could supernaturally connect you with and could make things different. Yes, I admit that there is potential problems with that, but I think most people would understand and agree that, you know what, you just can't live your life isolated. You can't live your life afraid of being hurt. Yes, there's risk that goes along with living in this world. But if you are going to succeed, you're going to have to get your hopes up. You could go and look at this. You could look at any person who's ever really succeeded in finances, in their health, in their relationships, in business, in some kind of like a sports event or something like this. Any person who makes the Olympics, any person who becomes the millionaire, any person who really wins and hits it big, I guarantee you they had to build their hopes up when nothing around them looked like it was, what am I trying to think of? It was confirming their goal or the thing that they were hoping for. They had to hope against hope and just go ahead and do it. This is exactly the terminology that's used over in Romans chapter 4. Let me turn over and read this about Abraham, and it tells you how he was able to receive this miracle. And it says in verse 18, Romans chapter 4, verse 18, who against hope believed in hope that he might become the father of many nations, according to that which was spoken, so shall thy seed be. So Abraham, when there was no reason to hope, he was nearly 100 years old, his wife was 90 years old, they were both past childbearing age. I mean, this was an absolute miracle. And in the natural, there was nothing to confirm or sustain his belief that he could have a child. And yet against hope, against just the limitations of human natural hope, Abraham believed in hope. Abraham started hoping and believing. And you know, if you've been listening to all of the things that I've taught on this, this will make a lot more sense to you. But I've talked about that an important part of hope is your imagination, and that there's things we can do to build our imagination. And I think this is exactly why God chose the things that He chose to speak to Abraham. Because He said, if you can count the stars in the sky, or count the numbers of grains of sand on the seashore, so shall your seed be. I believe one of the reasons that He gave him those two illustrations is because Abraham didn't live in a house the way you and I do. He lived outside. He was a nomad. Every night he looked up at the stars. So all night long, anytime he opened his eyes, he could think, so shall my seed be. During the day, he didn't have boots like what I am wearing right now. He wore sandals, and he walked through this dry land, and he got dirt on his feet. And every day he saw dust and dirt, and he said, that's how numerous my children are going to be. So day and night there was something visible, physical, that he could point to and relate to and remind himself that this is how numerous my children are going to be. And see, this is why his hope was so strong. Even at 100 years old, when it was well past childbearing age for him and his wife, he still had hope because he had looked at these things day and night for 26 years. And because of that, he was able to keep his faith strong. Brothers and sisters, you and I need to do this. We need to recognize that your faith is only going to bring into existence the things that are already a reality in your heart, in your hope. You've got to build your hope. You've got to increase your hope. And I tell you, our world is running in a negative direction. Our world is against hope. If you're going to be strong in hope, and like it says here about Abraham, who against hope believed in hope, you're going to have to do something to change the course of your life, because naturally you are not going to be a person of hope. You know, we listen to the news, and again, I'm making these programs months later, but you know, we just had the school shootings in Connecticut, and you hear these terrible things, and people are going to start talking worst case scenarios. And one of the statements that I heard somebody make was, where was God? And you know what? God was right there. God was there in the lives of 6 adults who literally threw themselves at this shooter to try and stop him. And he killed 6 adults. And then he was there in a janitor that ran down the hall, put his life at risk, yelling and alerting people, and they began to lock themselves in rooms and protect themselves. He was there in the teachers that, there was one teacher that locked her, and I forget how many children, but all of the children is either a closet or a bathroom, and told them to be quiet, and she locked it and refused to allow the shooter to come in there. God was in all of those people. God was in those first responders that came, and they barged into that school not knowing if there was going to be multiple guns and people still alive, or if there were bombs, and they put their life at risk. You know what? God was in all of those people. That's how God flows through people. And I'm saying, if you aren't careful, you will just look at the bad done. You will look at the evil through that one person. And we will talk about the evil and magnify the evil to the degree that it'll actually paint a negative picture on the inside of people. Fear will come upon people, and they'll start living their life in fear. But if you were to look at it the way I was just describing and see how that people, there were godly people that gave up their lives. Some of them lost their lives, others were able to keep their lives, but there was a lot of good that people put their life at risk to protect these children. See, if you look at that, you know what that does? That builds hope on the inside of you. Yes, there's evil in this world. People say, well, why did God allow that? God doesn't control us. We aren't like a pawn. You know, this shooter that did that, I'm not using his name purposely. I don't want to glorify something like that. But I think it was the governor of Connecticut said that evil visited us today. And you know, it really was evil. It was demonic. And I can guarantee you that that person, that didn't just come upon them. They have been doing something. I don't know any of the details, but I know what the Word says, that you have to conceive things in your heart. He had conceived violence and hatred. He was absolutely self-centered and only thinking about himself. He had a bitterness and something going on the inside of him that he had not cast over on the Lord. Who knows all of the things that were going on? But I'm saying it had been planned out. It was conceived in his heart. And we can either focus on that one person who did this terrible thing, or we can focus on the dozens and dozens of other people who stopped this terrible thing. And I tell you, the only way to really protect ourselves against that, you cannot build a fortress to keep evil out. You can do things in the natural that will limit and hinder what evil wants to do. But the only sure cure for evil is the gospel. And what we need to do is inject more people's hearts with the love of God. We need to get people who their lives are being changed. And the Scripture says that love works no ill to its neighbor. If people were really injected, infused with God's kind of love, that's the only way we're ever going to stop this. You can't put enough metal detectors. You can't take away all of the weapons. You can't build a fortress. You can't have enough armed guards. There will always be a way to somehow or another hurt people. They can wait until they come out and on their way home and somebody could shoot these kids. The only sure remedy for this is to change the hearts of people. And again, I'm saying that so many people are going to focus on the negative, and it's going to cause many people, their imagination, to start seeing and fearing in a negative way. But we could focus on the good. There is so much good that's being done. I heard this man, Darrell Scott, who was the father of Rachel Scott. For those of you that don't remember, Rachel Scott was one of the young girls that was killed in the Columbine shootings in 1999. And Darrell Scott was interviewed on Mike Huckabee's program. And Darrell Scott and a group of people have been going, and they have now spoken to over 3 million students in the last 10 years. And they know of 3 school shootings that have been averted because they spoke to people about how to deal with the frustrations and problems in their life. 3 school shootings were stopped, and over 500 suicides were stopped because of them going in. Now, see, we can focus on things like that. And it's easy. Anybody can tell the terrible things that happened, but who knows what would have happened if it hadn't have been for the godliness that's going on. I'm saying we have to focus on the positive. We have to, with our imagination, begin to start seeing success and victory instead of focusing on all of the problems. You can't go anywhere in your physical body that you haven't already been in your imagination. So therefore, you need to use your imagination to see yourself succeeding and fulfilling what God has called you to do. You know, today's going to be my last day to offer this second teaching in this set that we have on the power of hope. And our announcer is going to give you more information, but I just wanted to remind you that today's our last day to make this second teaching available to you as a gift. So please listen, please call or write today, and then join me again tomorrow as we continue the gospel truth.
Andrew's complete teaching titled The Power of Hope was recorded live at a recent conference. It's available on either CD or DVD. Or you can get the DVD as seen on TV. Each is available for £16. This series is also available for audio download absolutely free on our website. Go to awme.net, click on Resources at the top of the page, and then MP3 Teachings. The second audio teaching in today's series is titled Hope Paints a Picture. It's available for £3 when you write or call, but if you're simply unable to afford it, Andrew and his partners will send this second CD free of charge. We'd like to remind you that we're offering Andrew's latest book titled Christian Philosophy for £9.99. Contact us today to get your copy.
I want to remind you that today is my last day to offer the second teaching in this new set on the power of hope. Now, we are going to continue to offer the album. I have a CD album. I have a DVD album that was made from a live teaching and then we have As Seen on TV. So we've got 3 different ways you can get this. We will continue to offer these albums, but today will be our last day to offer you the 2nd CD in this CD album free of charge. We ask for a gift of any amount towards the album, but we offer the individual teachings one at a time free of charge. My partners have enabled me to do that. Today's our last day to make the 2nd teaching available as a gift.
You can use your credit card to order resources through our website at awme.net. While you're there, you can discover more product details and download additional free resources. Or you can order through our helpline Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Our helpline number is 01922-473-300. When calling from outside the UK, you must dial your international calling code, then 44-1922-473-300. If the lines are busy, remember you can order ministry materials 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at awme.net. To write us, use the address on your screen. We hope to hear from you today. We'd like to point out Andrew's upcoming speaking schedule. Mark your calendars to come meet Andrew at one of these events. In the month of February, he'll be in Santa Clara, Anaheim, and Pasadena, California. For more details on Andrew's next meeting in your area, call our helpline or visit our website at awme.net.
On today's broadcast, Andrew mentioned the shooting incident in Newtown, Connecticut. For more information and to read Andrew's complete response to this tragedy, go to awmi.net and click the Connecticut shooting link on the home page.
Come experience our family at Campus Days 2013, March 20th through 22nd at Charis Bible College, Colorado.
Are you a world changer? Charis Bible College has extension schools around the world. The same truth that sets you free at our school in England will also set you free in Belfast, St. Petersburg, Amsterdam, Kampala, Chennai, and South Africa. Go to awme.net or call our phone center and ask for a complete list of Charis Bible College locations.